The iron shackles around Clara Foster's wrists felt heavier than the shame burning in her chest as she stood on the auction block in San Angelo, Texas, watching the crowd of rough men assess her like cattle. Her father had gambled away everything they owned and more, accumulating a debt of $3,000 to a man named Marcus Thornhill, a saloon owner with cold eyes and colder intentions. When James Foster could not pay, Thornhill had invoked an old territorial law that allowed creditors to claim human collateral for unpaid debts. Clara had begged her father to find another way, but there was no other way. At 22 years old, she was being sold like property to settle accounts she had never agreed to create. The September sun beat down mercilessly on the wooden platform erected in the town square. Clara kept her eyes fixed on the horizon, refusing to meet the gazes of the men gathered below. She wore her only good dress, a faded blue cotton that had once belonged to her mother. Her dark hair hung in a braid down her back, and despite her attempt to appear dignified, she could feel the tremors running through her body. "Gentlemen, this here is Clara Foster," Thornhill announced, his voice carrying across the square. 22 years old, healthy, can read and write, knows how to cook and sew. The debt is $3,000. Who will take responsibility for this amount and claim ownership of her contract? Clara's stomach turned at the word ownership. She was not a slave, but in this moment the distinction felt meaningless. The year was 1881, and while the Civil War had ended 16 years ago, the ugly practice of debt bondage still existed in the territories, a loophole that men like Thornhill exploited without mercy. The crowd murmured, and Clara finally allowed herself to look at the faces below. Most were weathered ranch hands and drifters, men whose eyes held a hunger that made her skin crawl. Then her gaze landed on a tall figure standing apart from the others, leaning against a post with his arms crossed. He wore dusty leather chaps over dark trousers, a worn shirt, and a black hat pulled low over his eyes. Even from a distance, she could see the strong line of his jaw and the way he watched the proceedings with an expression she could not quite read. $200, someone called out, and Clara's heart sank. That was barely anything against the total debt. 500, another voice added. Thornhill shook his head impatiently. "Gentlemen, the debt is 3,000. Whoever takes this girl takes the full responsibility." A heavy silence fell over the square. $3,000 was a fortune, more than most working men saw in several years. Clara felt despair settling over her like a heavy blanket. If no one claimed the debt, Thornhill would simply keep her himself, and she had heard enough rumors about what happened to girls who ended up in his private rooms above the saloon. $3,000. The voice came from the tall man by the post. He pushed away from the wood and stepped forward, and Clara finally got a good look at him. He was probably in his late 20s, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of sage. His face was handsome in a rugged way, all sharp angles and strong features. There was something about the set of his shoulders that spoke of confidence, of a man who knew his own worth and did not need to prove it to anyone. Thornhill's eyes widened slightly. "Wade Nelson, I did not expect to see you bidding today. You have that kind of money." "I have it," Wade said simply. His voice was deep and steady, with a slight drawl that marked him as a native Texan. 3,000 cash payment. The crowd parted as Wade walked through them toward the platform. Clara watched him approach, her heart hammering against her ribs. She did not know whether to feel relief or terror. At least he did not look cruel, but appearances could deceive. She had learned that lesson well from her father, who had seemed like a devoted parent until his gambling addiction consumed him entirely. Wade climbed the steps to the platform and pulled a leather pouch from inside his vest. He counted out the money carefully, stacking gold coins and bills on the small table Thornhill had set up. The saloon owner verified the amount with greedy fingers, his face flushed with satisfaction. "The debt is paid in full," Thornhill announced. "Clara Foster, your contract now belongs to Wade Nelson. The terms are standard. You will work for him until he deems the debt repaid through your labor or until he chooses to release you from your obligation." Thornhill produced a sheaf of papers, already prepared with Clara's name and the amount. Wade signed where indicated, his handwriting surprisingly neat. Then Thornhill handed him the documents with a flourish. "She is all yours, Nelson. A pleasure doing business." Wade took the papers without a word and turned to Clara. Up close, his eyes were even more striking, flecked with gold that caught the sunlight. He studied her face for a long moment, and she forced herself to meet his gaze without flinching. "Can you ride?" he asked. The question surprised her. "Yes, sir. My horse is over there. Let's go." He started down the steps, and Clara followed, acutely aware of every eye watching them. Wade led her to a magnificent bay stallion tied outside the general store. The horse stamped and tossed its head, clearly spirited. Wade untied the reins and swung into the saddle with easy grace, then extended his hand down to Clara. She hesitated only a moment before taking it. His grip was strong and calloused, his fingers warm against hers. He pulled her up behind him as if she weighed nothing, and Clara had to wrap her arms around his waist to keep from sliding off. She could feel the solid muscle of his back against her chest, smell the scent of leather and sage and something uniquely him. "Hold on tight," Wade said, and then they were moving. He guided the horse through the streets of San Angelo at a steady trot, heading away from the town square toward the open country beyond. Clara held on, feeling the rhythm of the horse beneath them, watching the buildings give way to scrubland dotted with mesquite and prickly pear. The Concho River glittered in the distance, a ribbon of silver cutting through the brown landscape. They rode for what felt like hours but was probably closer to 40 minutes. Wade did not speak, and Clara did not dare break the silence. Her mind churned with questions and fears, but she kept them locked behind her teeth. Finally, Wade slowed the horse and then stopped completely. They were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by nothing but empty land and endless sky. Wade dismounted and helped Clara down, his hands steady on her waist. Then he reached into his saddlebag and pulled out the contract papers Thornhill had given him. Clara watched, confused, as he unfolded them and held them up so she could see her name written across the top. "These papers say you belong to me," Wade said quietly. "That you are bound to work off a debt you did not create, for a man you did not know, for as long as I decide to keep you." Clara's throat tightened. "Yes, sir. That does not sit right with me." Wade held her gaze for another moment, then deliberately tore the papers in half. The sound of ripping parchment was shockingly loud in the quiet afternoon. He tore them again and again until the contract was nothing but confetti in his hands. Then he opened his fingers and let the pieces scatter on the wind. Clara stared at him, unable to process what she had just witnessed. "I do not understand." "You are free," Wade said simply. "I paid your father's debt, and now the debt is gone. You do not owe me anything. But $3,000. Clara's voice came out as barely a whisper. "That is a fortune. It is just money." Wade shrugged, as if he had not just thrown away more wealth than Clara had seen in her entire life. "I have a ranch about 2 hours' ride from here. Good land, decent house, but it is just me running the place. I could use help if you are willing to work for wages. Room and board plus $20 a month. You would have your own space, your own time. If you want to leave eventually, you are free to do so. But if you need somewhere to go right now, the offer stands." Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. She had been prepared for so many terrible things, had steeled herself to endure whatever fate awaited her. This unexpected kindness left her defenseless, cracking open something in her chest that had been locked tight with fear. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "You do not know me." Wade was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "5 years ago, my sister got into some trouble with a bad man. He claimed she owed him money, though she never borrowed a cent. Before I could get to her, he sold her contract to a mine owner up north. By the time I tracked her down, she had been worked nearly to death in those tunnels. She died 2 weeks after I brought her home." His voice remained steady, but Clara could hear the old grief beneath the words. She understood then that this was not really about her at all. Wade was trying to save someone he could not save before. "I am sorry about your sister," Clara said softly, "and I accept your offer. I will work hard, I promise. I do not doubt it." Wade's expression softened slightly, the hard lines around his mouth easing. "Come on, then. Let's get you home before dark." They rode together through the changing afternoon light, and Clara felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It took her a while to recognize it as hope. Wade's ranch was called the Double N, named for the Nelson family that had worked the land for 2 generations. The house was a sturdy 2-story structure built from local limestone, with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Behind it stood a barn, a bunkhouse, a chicken coop, and several smaller outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, moving slowly across the grassland like dark clouds. Wade showed Clara to a small room on the 2nd floor. It was simply furnished with a bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the ranch yard. To Clara, who had been sleeping on a pallet in the corner of her father's single room, it seemed like luxury. "Supper is usually around 7, Wade said from the doorway. "Kitchen is downstairs. There is a pump out back for washing up. Make yourself comfortable." "Thank you," Clara said, meaning it with her whole heart. Wade nodded and left, his boots heavy on the wooden stairs. Clara sat down on the bed and let herself cry, releasing all the fear and tension she had been holding since her father had told her what he had done. She cried for her lost innocence, for her father's betrayal, for the mother she barely remembered who had died when Clara was 10. She cried for Wade's sister, and for all the other women who had not been as fortunate as Clara was today. When the tears finally stopped, Clara washed her face in the basin and went downstairs to see about supper. The kitchen was large and well-equipped, with a cast-iron stove, a sturdy table, and shelves lined with supplies. Clara found flour, salt, dried beans, and some vegetables in a root cellar. She set about making biscuits and bean soup, falling into the familiar rhythm of cooking. It felt good to have something useful to do with her hands. Wade came in just as she was pulling the biscuits from the oven. He had washed up and changed his shirt, and his hair was still damp. He looked surprised to see the table set and food ready. "You did not have to do this tonight," he said. "I figured you would want to rest." "I wanted to," Clara replied, "to show my gratitude." They sat down across from each other, and for a few minutes the only sound was the clink of spoons against bowls. Clara snuck glances at Wade when she thought he was not looking, trying to understand this man who had saved her. His face was hard to read, all weathered stillness. "These biscuits are good," Wade said finally. "Best I have had in a long time." "My mother taught me," Clara said. "Before she passed. What happened to her? Fever. It took her fast." Clara stirred her soup, the old sadness rising up. "My father was different after that. He started spending more time at the saloons, less time at home. I tried to keep things together, but I was just a child. By the time I was old enough to understand what was happening, he was too far gone into the gambling." Wade nodded slowly. Grief makes people do strange things, but that does not excuse what he did to you. No, Clara agreed quietly. It does not. They finished the meal in companionable silence. Afterward, Clara cleaned up while Wade went to check on the horses. She found a strange peace in the domestic tasks, in knowing that she was safe here, at least for now. Over the following days, Clara settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She rose before dawn to make breakfast, then spent her mornings tending the vegetable garden, feeding the chickens, and doing laundry. In the afternoons, she often helped Wade with lighter ranch tasks, mending tack, sorting supplies, occasionally riding out to check fence lines. Wade was patient with her, teaching her about the ranch operations without making her feel ignorant. They developed an easy partnership, learning to work around each other's habits. Wade was quiet by nature, but Clara discovered he had a dry sense of humor that emerged at unexpected moments. He was also startlingly competent at everything he did, moving through his work with the confidence of long practice. Clara found herself watching him more than she should. The way his shoulders moved when he lifted hay bales, the careful gentleness in his hands when he treated a lame horse, the rare smile that transformed his entire face. She told herself it was just gratitude, just admiration for a good man. But late at night, lying in her small bed, she could not deny the warmth that spread through her when she thought of him. 3 weeks after Clara arrived at the Double N, a storm rolled in from the west. The sky turned an ominous green-black, and the wind picked up until it howled around the house like a living thing. Wade secured the animals in the barn and made sure all the shutters were latched tight. "Stay inside," he told Clara as the first fat raindrops began to fall. Texas storms can be mean. The rain came down in sheets, so heavy Clara could barely see the barn from the kitchen window. Thunder shook the house, and lightning turned the world white for brief, blinding moments. Clara had seen storms before, but nothing like this raw display of nature's power. She was lighting lamps against the early darkness when Wade came in, soaked through despite his oilcloth coat. Water dripped from his hat and ran down his face. "There is a leak in the barn roof," he said. "I need to get some buckets under it before the hay gets ruined." "I will help," Clara said immediately. "You will get drenched, so will you?" She was already reaching for her shawl. "2 people will be faster than 1. Wade looked like he wanted to argue, but another crack of thunder made the decision for them. They ran together through the downpour to the barn, where water was indeed dripping steadily through a weak spot in the roof. They positioned buckets and moved the hay bales that were in danger of getting wet. It was hard, physical work made harder by the dim light and the constant roar of rain on the roof. Clara was hauling a particularly heavy bale when her foot slipped on the wet floor. She fell hard, the bale landing partially on top of her. Before she could even cry out, Wade was there, lifting the hay off her with one hand and pulling her up with the other. "Are you hurt?" His voice was urgent, his hands running over her arms and shoulders checking for injury. "I am fine," Clara said, though her ankle throbbed where she had twisted it. "Just clumsy." Wade did not look convinced. He swept her up into his arms without warning, carrying her toward the house as if she weighed nothing at all. Clara clutched at his shoulders, acutely aware of the strength in his body, the way his arms held her securely against his chest. He kicked open the door and carried her straight to the sitting room, settling her gently on the sofa. Then he knelt in front of her and carefully removed her boot, his touch surprisingly gentle. "It is swelling," he said, probing the ankle with careful fingers. "Not broken, but you gave it a good twist. I am sorry for being foolish. You were helping." Wade looked up at her, his eyes intense in the lamplight. "That was not foolish." He was still holding her foot, his thumb unconsciously stroking the arch. The touch sent tingles up Clara's leg that had nothing to do with injury. She became suddenly aware of how close he was, how intimate this position felt. Wade seemed to realize it at the same moment. His hand stilled, and something shifted in the air between them. "Clara," he said, and her name in his deep voice made something clench low in her belly. "Yes. I should get some cloth to wrap this." But he did not move, just kept looking at her with an expression that made her heart race. The storm raged outside, but inside the house, everything was quiet except for the sound of their breathing. Clara reached out without thinking and touched Wade's face, tracing the line of his jaw. His skin was rough with stubble, warm beneath her fingers. Wade closed his eyes, his jaw clenching under her touch. "You should not do that." "Why not?" "Because I am trying very hard to be honorable here." His eyes opened and the raw hunger in them stole Clara's breath. "I did not bring you here for this. You do not owe me anything." "I know," Clara said softly. "This is not about debt." She leaned forward and kissed him, tentative and questioning. For a moment Wade was still as stone. Then he made a low sound in his throat and kissed her back, one hand coming up to cup the back of her head. The kiss deepened, becoming something urgent and necessary. Clara had been kissed before, clumsy stolen moments behind the church in San Angelo, but nothing had prepared her for this. Wade kissed like he did everything else, with complete focus and devastating skill. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "This changes things," he said quietly. "I know. I do not want you to feel obligated." Clara pulled back enough to look him in the eyes. "Wade, you tore up my contract. You gave me freedom. Whatever I feel for you has nothing to do with obligation and everything to do with you being the most remarkable man I have ever met." A slow smile spread across Wade's face, transforming him from handsome to absolutely beautiful. "You think I am remarkable. I think you are infuriating and noble and far too quiet for your own good," Clara said, smiling back. "And yes, remarkable." Wade kissed her again, softer this time, almost reverent. "I have wanted to do that since the first moment I saw you on that platform, looking so fierce and frightened. You hid it well. I have had practice keeping my feelings hidden." He touched her face, his calloused thumb tracing her cheekbone. "But I do not want to hide anymore. Not with you." They sat together on the sofa as the storm slowly passed, talking in low voices about everything and nothing. Wade told her about growing up on the ranch, about his father who had died in a riding accident and his mother who had followed soon after from a broken heart. Clara told him about her dreams of seeing the ocean someday, of maybe opening a bakery. They talked until the lamps burned low and the rain became a gentle patter against the windows. When Clara finally went up to bed, her injured ankle wrapped snugly in cloth, she felt like a different person than the terrified girl who had stood on that auction block. She fell asleep smiling, Wade's kiss still tingling on her lips. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed the world clean. Clara woke to find a pair of crutches leaning against her door, clearly handmade overnight. The craftsmanship was rough but functional, and the gesture made her chest warm. She made her way downstairs and found Wade already in the kitchen, attempting to make coffee. He looked up when she entered, and the shy smile he gave her was worth more than all the gold in Texas. "How is the ankle?" he asked. "Better. Thank you for these." She indicated the crutches. "Figured you would be stubborn about staying off it." There was affection in his voice that had not been there before, an openness that made everything feel different. They ate breakfast together, and the air between them crackled with new awareness. Every accidental touch felt electric. Every shared glance held meaning. Clara felt like she was walking on clouds despite her injured ankle. Wade insisted she rest for the day, so Clara settled in the sitting room with some mending. But she found it hard to concentrate. Her mind kept drifting to Wade, to the possibility of a future she had not dared imagine before. She had been so focused on survival that she had not thought about happiness. Now it seemed to shimmer before her, tantalizing and within reach. Wade came in around noon with sandwiches and lemonade. He sat beside her on the sofa, closer than strictly necessary. "I have been thinking," he said. "That sounds dangerous." He laughed, a real laugh that lit up his whole face. "Maybe. Clara, I know this is sudden. We have only known each other a few weeks, but I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. When I saw you on that platform, something in me just knew." Clara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Knew what?" "That you were meant to be mine. Not in a possessive way, not like that contract implied, but in the way two people can belong to each other, equal and free." He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I am not good with pretty words. I am just a rancher, and this is a hard life. But if you would consider staying, not as an employee but as my partner, as my wife eventually, I would spend every day trying to make you happy." Clara felt tears spilling down her cheeks, but these were good tears, joyful tears. "Wade, are you proposing?" "Not yet. I know it is too soon, and I do not want you to feel rushed." He wiped her tears away with his thumb. "I am just telling you my intentions. I am courting you properly, Clara Foster, and when enough time has passed that you can be sure of your own heart, I will ask you properly." "What if I am already sure?" Clara asked. Wade's eyes searched her face. "Are you?" "I think I started falling in love with you the moment you tore up those papers," Clara admitted. "You gave me back my life. But more than that, you saw me as a person worth saving. No one has ever made me feel the way you do, Wade. Safe and valued and like I matter." "You do matter. More than anything." Wade kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips. "We will do this right. I will court you proper, and people will know you chose me freely." Over the following weeks, Wade was true to his word. He courted Clara with a steady patience that made her love him more each day. He brought her wildflowers from the range, taught her to shoot a rifle so she would never be helpless again, and sat with her on the porch every evening sharing his thoughts about the day. Clara blossomed under the attention. She grew confident in her role at the ranch, developing her own routine and making small improvements to the house. She planted herbs in the garden, organized the pantry, and began experimenting with new recipes. The ranch started to feel like a home rather than just a shelter. One Saturday, Wade took her into San Angelo for supplies. Clara was nervous about returning to the town where she had been humiliated, but Wade held her hand the entire time, making it clear to everyone they encountered that Clara was with him by choice. They walked through the mercantile together, and Wade consulted her opinion on everything from fabric to farming equipment. They were loading supplies into the wagon when Marcus Thornhill appeared, his face twisted with displeasure. "Nelson," he said coldly, "I see you still have the Foster girl." "Miss Foster is here of her own free will," Wade replied, his voice level but with an edge of steel underneath. "I heard you destroyed her contract. That was foolish. She was valuable property." Wade stepped forward, putting himself between Clara and Thornhill. "She was never property. And if you refer to her that way again, we are going to have a serious problem." Thornhill's eyes narrowed. "You paid $3,000 for nothing, then. That makes you a fool." "I paid $3,000 to keep a good woman out of your hands," Wade said quietly. "Best money I ever spent." The two men stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, Thornhill sneered and walked away, but not before shooting Clara a look of pure venom. She shivered despite the warm afternoon. "He will not bother you," Wade said, taking her hand again. "I promise." "How can you be sure?" "Because everyone in this town knows that anyone who hurts you will answer to me." Wade's expression was hard. "And I have a reputation for being very unforgiving when it comes to protecting what is mine." Despite the tension of the encounter, Clara felt a warm glow at his words. She was Wade's and he was hers. It was that simple and that complicated. They finished loading the wagon and headed back to the ranch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Clara leaned against Wade's shoulder, feeling the steady warmth of him beside her. "Thank you for standing up for me," she said. "Always," Wade replied. "For as long as you will have me. That might be a very long time. I am counting on it." Summer faded into fall, and the landscape around the double N turned golden. Clara and Wade worked side by side during the cattle drive to market, and Clara proved herself capable of handling the hard work. She rode well, could rope a stray calf, and never complained about the long days. The ranch hands who helped with the drive treated her with respect, partly because she earned it and partly because Wade made it clear that disrespect would not be tolerated. On the evening after they returned from the drive, Wade took Clara to a hilltop overlooking the ranch. The sun was setting, and the entire valley was bathed in golden light. They sat together on a blanket, and Wade pulled a small box from his pocket. "Clara Foster," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. "I know it has only been 4 months, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life. Will you marry me?" Clara's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the ring, then at Wade's hopeful, earnest face. "Yes," she said. "Yes, absolutely yes." Wade slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her deeply, pulling her close. They stayed on that hilltop until the stars came out, making plans for their future and reveling in the simple joy of being together. They were married in November in a small church in San Angelo. Clara wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself, with lace she had ordered from a catalog. Wade wore his best suit, looking almost uncomfortable in the formal clothes but devastatingly handsome nonetheless. The ceremony was attended by a few ranchers from neighboring spreads, the minister, and his wife who served as witnesses. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Wade kissed Clara with such tenderness that she felt it all the way to her toes. They were legally bound now, but it felt different from that horrible contract. This was a choice they both made freely, a promise they both wanted to keep. The wedding supper was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the barn that Clara had decorated with fall flowers and candles. It was a simple celebration, but full of genuine warmth. Clara looked around at the gathered people, at the home she had helped build, at the man who was now her husband, and felt a contentment she had never imagined possible. That night, Wade carried her over the threshold of their bedroom, the master bedroom that Clara had moved into just that morning. He set her down gently and cupped her face in his hands. "Are you happy?" he asked. "Happier than I have any right to be," Clara replied truthfully. "You have every right," Wade said fiercely. "After everything you have been through, you deserve all the happiness in the world." They made love that night for the first time, and it was sweet and careful and full of discovery. Wade was patient with Clara's inexperience, taking his time to learn what made her gasp and sigh. Clara marveled at the intimacy of it, at how being this close to another person could feel like coming home. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, and Wade traced lazy patterns on Clara's shoulder. "I love you," he said quietly. "I do not think I say it enough." "You show it every day," Clara replied, "in 1,000 small ways. Still, I want you to hear it. I love you, Clara Nelson." Clara smiled at her new name. I love you too. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. A hard winter killed several head of cattle, and they had to tighten their budget significantly. Clara learned to stretch every penny, making do with what they had and finding creative solutions to problems. Wade worked himself nearly to exhaustion trying to keep the ranch afloat, but through it all, they had each other. On the coldest nights, they kept warm wrapped in each other's arms. When money was tightest, they laughed about beans for dinner again and made it an adventure. When Wade worried about the future, Clara reminded him of how far they had already come. Spring brought relief in the form of good grazing and healthy calves. The ranch began to recover its footing. Clara tended her garden with renewed energy, planting vegetables and flowers that would feed them and beautify their home. She also started selling her baked goods in town, bringing in a small but steady income that helped with expenses. One morning in early June, Clara woke feeling queasy. She barely made it outside before being violently sick. Wade found her on the porch, pale and shaking. "I am getting the doctor," he said, already moving toward the barn. "Wait," Clara caught his arm. "I do not think I need a doctor." Wade looked at her with confusion, then understanding dawned on his face. "Are you saying—" "I think I might be pregnant," Clara said, and despite her nausea, she was smiling. Wade let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around until she laughingly begged him to stop before she was sick again. He set her down carefully, his hands going immediately to her still flat stomach. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Clara asked, suddenly nervous. "Happy, Clara, I am over the moon." Wade kissed her soundly. "You have just made me the happiest man in Texas." The pregnancy was not easy. Clara suffered from terrible morning sickness that often lasted all day. The summer heat made her uncomfortable and swollen. But Wade was attentive and patient, taking over more of the household chores and insisting Clara rest whenever possible. He read every book he could find about pregnancy and childbirth, determined to be prepared. Clara's father, James Foster, tried to contact her once during this time. He showed up at the ranch drunk and belligerent, demanding money. Wade met him in the yard, and Clara watched from the window as the two men spoke. She could not hear the words, but she saw her father's increasingly angry gestures and Wade's calm, firm responses. Finally, James turned and staggered away, and Wade came back inside. "What did you say to him?" Clara asked. "I told him he was not welcome here, and that if he ever tried to contact you again, I would have the sheriff arrest him for trespassing." Wade's jaw was tight. "He said you owed him for raising you. I told him he lost any claim to you the day he sold you like property." Clara felt tears threatening. "He is still my father." "He is a drunk and a coward who put his own daughter in danger to cover his gambling debts," Wade said bluntly. "You do not owe him anything, Clara. Not forgiveness, not money, nothing." Deep down, Clara knew Wade was right. She had mourned the loss of her father long ago, back when his addiction first took hold. The man who had shown up today was a stranger wearing her father's face. "Thank you for protecting me," she said. Wade pulled her into his arms. "Always. You and this baby are my family now. I will protect you both with everything I have." Clara went into labor on a cold February night during a thunderstorm, as if her child wanted to make a dramatic entrance. The local midwife, Mrs. Perkins, was fetched despite the weather, and she took over the bedroom with brisk efficiency. Wade was banished downstairs, where he paced like a caged animal, flinching at every cry from above. The labor lasted 14 hours. Clara had never known such pain existed, but every time she thought she could not endure another moment, she looked at Mrs. Perkins' encouraging face and found the strength to continue. Finally, as dawn broke and the storm cleared, Her son came into the world with a lusty cry that could probably be heard all the way to San Angelo. "You have a boy," Mrs. Perkins announced, placing the squirming, red-faced infant on Clara's chest. "A big, healthy boy." Clara looked down at her son in wonder. He had a shock of dark hair and his eyes were squeezed shut as he wailed his displeasure at this new, cold world. She touched his tiny hand, and his fingers immediately wrapped around hers with surprising strength. Wade burst into the room before Mrs. Perkins could stop him, his face wild with worry. "Clara, are you all right? Come meet your son," Clara said, smiling through her exhaustion. Wade approached slowly, reverently, his eyes locked on the baby. When he reached the bed, he sank down beside Clara and stared at their child with an expression of absolute awe. "He is perfect," Wade whispered. "You are perfect. I cannot believe we made this." "What should we name him?" Clara asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, but had never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at her son's face, Clara knew exactly what he should be called. "William," she said. "After your father, William James Nelson." Wade's eyes grew suspiciously bright. "You would do that?" "Name him after my father. Your father was a good man who loved his family. That is a legacy worth honoring." Clara touched Wade's cheek. "And maybe someday our son will be half the man his father is." Wade kissed her softly, carefully, mindful of her exhaustion. "Thank you." For him, for everything. William was a demanding infant who did not appreciate sleep and preferred to spend his nights crying lustily. Clara and Wade took turns walking him around the house, singing lullabies, and trying every trick they could think of to soothe him. They were both exhausted, stumbling through their days in a fog of sleep deprivation. But there were moments of pure magic. The first time William smiled, a real smile and not just gas, Clara burst into tears of joy. The first time he reached for Wade deliberately, laughing as his father swooped him into the air, Wade looked like he might cry too. Every milestone, no matter how small, felt like a miracle. As William grew, his personality emerged. He was curious and fearless, getting into everything he could reach. Clara spent her days chasing after him, removing dangerous objects from his grasp, and marveling at his endless energy. Wade adored his son, teaching him about the ranch as soon as he could walk, letting him help with chores that probably took twice as long with a toddler's assistance. When William was 3, Clara discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect. She and Wade hoped for a daughter this time, though they agreed another healthy child was all that truly mattered. Their daughter arrived on a beautiful October afternoon, with much less drama than her brother's birth. She had Clara's dark hair and Wade's sage-green eyes, and she was the most placid baby Clara had ever encountered. Where William had been all noise and fury, little Catherine was content to observe the world quietly from her mother's arms. "She is going to be the calm one," Wade predicted, cradling his daughter with the confidence of an experienced father. "The one who keeps William from doing anything too foolish," Clara laughed. "Someone will have to." Their family felt complete now. The house rang with children's laughter and the chaos of daily life. Clara sometimes thought back to that terrified girl on the auction block and marveled at the distance she had traveled. That girl could never have imagined this life, this happiness. The years passed in a blur of activity. William grew into a sturdy boy who loved the ranch and followed his father everywhere. Catherine developed a quiet strength and a gift for gentling animals, spending hours in the barn with the horses. Clara and Wade worked side by side, building their ranch into something prosperous and sustainable. They had challenges, of course. A drought one year that tested their resources. a neighboring rancher who tried to claim part of their land before being firmly rebuffed, the normal struggles of raising children and managing a business. But through everything, Clara and Wade faced their problems as a team, their love deepening with each passing year. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Wade took Clara back to the hilltop where he had proposed. The children were staying with Mrs. Perkins in town, giving them a rare evening alone. They sat together on a blanket, watching the sunset paint the sky. "You ever regret it?" Wade asked quietly. "Staying here, marrying a simple rancher?" Clara looked at him in surprise. "Regret it? Wade, this life with you is better than anything I could have imagined for myself. I know it has been hard sometimes. The work, the worry, the lean years." "Every life has hard times," Clara said. "What matters is who you go through them with. And I would rather face 1,000 challenges with you than have an easy life with anyone else." Wade smiled, the same smile that still made Clara's heart skip after 10 years. "I love you more now than I did the day we married. I did not think that was possible, but every year with you just proves me wrong." "I love you too," Clara said. "Thank you for saving me." "You saved yourself," Wade corrected. "You were strong enough to survive what your father did, brave enough to accept a stranger's help, and wise enough to build a life worth living. I just gave you the opportunity." "You gave me everything," Clara insisted. "Freedom, safety, love, a family. You took a broken girl and helped her become whole." Wade pulled her close, and they watched the stars emerge one by one. In the distance, the ranch lights glowed warm and welcoming. Their home, their family, their life together. "You remember the day we met?" Clara asked. "When you tore up those papers?" "I remember everything about that day," Wade said. "The way you stood so straight on that platform, refusing to be broken. The way you looked at me when I pulled you up on the horse, like you could not decide if I was your salvation or just a different kind of danger. The way you fit perfectly in my arms when we rode away. I was so scared," Clara admitted. "But there was something about you that made me feel safe even in my fear." "I was scared too," Wade confessed. "Terrified that I would mess it up somehow, that you would see through my calm exterior to the nervous man underneath." Clara laughed. "You hit it very well. I had practice. But from the moment I saw you, I knew you were going to change my life. I just did not realize how completely, how wonderfully, you would transform everything." They stayed on that hilltop until late, talking and laughing and simply being together. When they finally returned home, the house was dark and quiet without the children. Wade pulled Clara into his arms in their bedroom, kissing her with the passion of a new bridegroom and the tenderness of a longtime husband. "Here is to the next 10 years," he murmured against her lips. "And the 10 after that, and every year beyond until we are old and gray." "I cannot wait," Clara replied, meaning every word. The ranch continued to prosper. William turned out to have a head for business along with his love of ranching. And by the time he was 16, he was helping Wade make important decisions about the operation. Catherine discovered a talent for breeding horses, developing a line of strong, reliable mounts that became sought after throughout the region. Clara's bakery dream came true in an unexpected way. She started selling her goods at the general store in San Angelo, and they became so popular that she eventually opened a small shop in town. She hired 2 local women to help her, providing them with good wages and respectable work. Wade supported her completely, never suggesting that her place was only in the home. One afternoon, when Clara was 50 years old and Wade was 53, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset as had become their habit. William was married now with a child of his own, living in the bunkhouse with his young family and preparing to eventually take over the ranch. Catherine was engaged to a kind veterinarian from San Antonio. Did you ever think we would make it this far? Clara asked, leaning against Wade's shoulder. I hoped, Wade replied, but hoping and knowing are different things. We have been blessed, Clara, with good health, good children, good fortune. We have worked hard too, Clara pointed out. It was not all luck. No, but we were lucky in each other. Wade kissed the top of her head. Some people search their whole lives for what we found in a single moment. Clara thought about that moment, about standing on that auction block certain her life was over, about Wade stepping forward with his quiet confidence and his $3,000, about the sound of tearing paper and the feel of freedom settling over her like a warm blanket. You know what I think about sometimes, Clara said. All the other women who were not as fortunate as me, the ones who ended up with cruel masters or in Thornhill's brothel or worked to death in mines. I think about your sister and how she did not get to escape. Wade was quiet for a moment. I think about her too. Every time I look at you and our children, I think about how different things could have been. It is part of why I have always supported your bakery, why I encourage Catherine to follow her dreams. Every woman who has a choice, who has freedom, honors my sister's memory. She would be proud of you, Clara said softly. She would have loved you, Wade replied. She always wanted me to find someone good, someone real. You are both of those things and more. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened. Inside the house, they could hear William's son, little Wade, laughing at something. The sound of the next generation, carrying forward the legacy they had built. No regrets, Wade asked, as he had so many times over the years. Not a single one, Clara answered, as she always did. You? Only that I did not meet you sooner, Wade said. But then again, maybe we needed to be who we were, to go through what we did, to be ready for each other. That is very philosophical of you, Wade laughed. I have my moments. Clara turned to face him, taking in the familiar lines of his face. He was older now, his hair more silver than brown, lines carved deep around his eyes from years of squinting in the sun. But he was still the most handsome man she had ever seen, and her heart still raced when he smiled at her. I love you, Wade Nelson, she said. Thank you for being brave enough to save me and patient enough to let me save myself. I love you too, Clara Nelson, Wade replied. Thank you for seeing the man I wanted to be and helping me become him. They kissed as the stars emerged, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that surpassed their wildest dreams. Behind them, the house glowed with lamplight, warm and welcoming. Before them, the ranch stretched into the darkness, every acre a testament to their hard work and dedication. Years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow as all years do. Wade's health began to fail when he was in his early 60s, a lingering illness that slowly sapped his strength. Clara nursed him devotedly, refusing to leave his side even when William and Catherine tried to give her a break. She had spent 28 years as Wade's wife, and she intended to treasure every moment she had left with him. On a quiet spring morning, Wade passed away peacefully in their bed, Clara's hand clasped in his. His last words were, "Thank you for the best life a man could ask for." Clara grieved deeply, but she did not break. Wade had given her strength along with his love, and she carried both forward. She continued running her bakery, spending time with her grandchildren, and helping William manage the ranch. She told stories about their grandfather to the young ones, ensuring that Wade's memory stayed alive. When Clara was 78 years old, she passed away in her sleep. The whole town of San Angelo turned out for her funeral, a testament to the life she had lived and the people she had touched. She was buried next to Wade on that hilltop where he had proposed, where they had celebrated their anniversary so many times. Their graves overlooked the Double N, the ranch that had been the foundation of their life together. William and Catherine stood together at the graveside. Their own children and grandchildren gathered around them. As they said their final goodbyes, William thought about the story his mother had told him many times about how she had met his father, about the auction block and the torn papers, about a man brave enough to stand up for what was right and a woman strong enough to accept freedom when it was offered. "They had a good life," Catherine said quietly, taking her brother's hand. "They had a great life," William corrected, "because they chose each other every single day." The sun set over the double N, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, the same colors that had witnessed so many of Clara and Wade's evenings together. The ranch would continue, passed down through generations, a living legacy of two people who had found love in the most unexpected circumstances and nurtured it into something beautiful and enduring. The story of Clara and Wade became a legend in San Angelo, told and retold over the years. The details changed slightly with each telling, but the heart of it remained the same. A story about courage and kindness, about a man who saw injustice and chose to act, about a woman who refused to let circumstances define her. It was a story about freedom and love, about second chances and choosing hope over despair. And in the way of all the best love stories, it was a reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us exactly where we need to be, that darkness can give way to light, and that true love, when nurtured and protected, can transform everything it touches. The double N still stands today, run by Clara and Wade's descendants, the land still rich and productive. In the main house, there is a framed piece of parchment on the wall. It is torn and yellowed with age, the pieces carefully preserved and mounted. It is the contract that Wade tore up all those years ago, retrieved and reassembled by Clara as a reminder of the day her life truly began. Beneath it is a plaque that reads, "Freedom is not given, it is claimed. Love is not bought, it is freely shared." Wade and Clara Nelson, 1881–1943, together in life and in eternity. Their story endures because it speaks to something fundamental in the human spirit, the desire for dignity, the power of compassion, and the transformative nature of love. In a harsh world that often treated people as commodities, Wade chose to see Clara as a person worthy of respect and freedom. In return, Clara chose to see Wade as more than just her savior, but as a partner, a friend, and eventually the love of her life. Their grandson, Wade Nelson III, still runs the Double N Ranch. He is married to a woman named Sarah, and they have 4 children of their own. He tells his children about their great-great-grandparents, making sure they understand the values that built this ranch and this family. He teaches them that strength comes in many forms, that kindness is never weakness, and that the truest measure of a person is how they treat those who have no power to help them in return. The bakery that Clara founded still operates in San Angelo, now run by her great-granddaughter. Above the counter hangs a photograph of Clara in her later years, her face lined with age but her eyes still bright, her smile still warm. Customers often comment on the picture, asking about the woman with such a kind face. The staff tells them the story, shortened and simplified, about a woman who overcame tremendous obstacles to build a life of meaning and purpose. Every year on November 15th, the anniversary of Wade and Clara's wedding, the family gathers at the ranch for a celebration. They eat Clara's biscuit recipe and Wade's favorite stew. They tell stories about the couple, ensuring that each new generation knows where they came from. They raise glasses to toast 2 people who chose love over fear, hope over despair, and who built something lasting from the ashes of what could have been a tragedy. The land around the Double N has changed over the years. San Angelo has grown from a rough frontier town into a proper city. The days of debt bondage and auction blocks are long gone, relegated to history books and cautionary tales. But the values that Wade and Clara embodied remain relevant. The importance of standing up for what is right, the power of compassion, the strength that comes from true partnership. Their love story reminds us that our circumstances do not define us. Clara could have become bitter and broken by her father's betrayal, and the horror of being sold like property. Instead, she chose to embrace the freedom Wade offered and build a life of purpose. Wade could have become cynical after his sister's death, hardened by loss and anger. Instead, he chose to honor her memory by saving someone else, by being the help that had come too late for his own family. Together, they created something beautiful. Not just a successful ranch or a thriving family, but a legacy of love and kindness that continues to ripple outward through time. Their story teaches us that love is not about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It is about choosing each other every day, about working through challenges together, about seeing the best in one another even in the worst of times. As the sun sets over the Double N Ranch on this particular evening, casting long shadows across the land that Clara and Wade built together, there is a sense of peace that settles over everything. The cattle are secure in their pastures. The horses are content in their barn. The house glows with warm light, filled with the sounds of family and laughter. And on that hilltop where they were married, where they celebrated anniversaries, where they now rest side by side, the wind whispers through the grass like a love song. If you listen carefully, you can almost hear it. The sound of two hearts that beat as one, a love story that transcended time and circumstance, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope and love can prevail. Clara and Wade's story is not just history. It is a living testament to the power of human connection, to the courage it takes to choose compassion over cruelty, to the beautiful things that can grow when we water the seeds of kindness with action. Their love transformed not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone who came after them, creating a legacy that will endure for generations to come. And so the story ends where all the best love stories end. Not with an ending at all, but with a continuation, a promise that love like theirs never truly dies, but lives on in the hearts and lives of those who remember and are inspired to love more bravely because of it.